Hello, everyone. We'll be with you in just 2 seconds. We just have a technical issue.
That's right.
And I'll just hand over to Alistair now.
Cool. Yeah, let me put this in percent mode. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us for this, which is the last WikiHouse community event of this year. Which is and I think this is I think the first one also that we're streaming this on both YouTube and on Instagram. So the recording will be available like immediately afterwards, basically. So hi if you're watching this on repeat. And I think so. Please feel free, like all the way through. We're going to share some stuff. If you have questions, please feel free to add those anytime, really, and then we'll go through all those and have a chance to go through those at the end, as well as So please throw in your questions at any point, really. So we're going to show something today, which we've been working on for literally years. It's been a real labor of love, really. And I just wanted to kind of start by acknowledging that like a lot of people have worked on this over a long period of time. It's something that we're super passionate about, some of whom aren't even part of the team anymore. And we've benefited here from various pieces of funding, including some EU funding, the National Lottery funding, which has enabled us to build all this stuff completely open source, which is really cool. Like all the stuff that we do around WikiHouse. Yeah, lots of brilliant brains, both within the team, within our collaborators, and beyond, have kind of been thinking and working on versions and variants of this, and really trying to sweat this problem for a really long time. So we're really excited to finally kind of share something more broadly with the WikiHouse community to test with us. And we've called it build.wikihouse.cc. The alphabet is really important, so I want to kind of stress that I'm going to stress this a couple of times. This is definitely a prototype, and so we're going to talk a bit about why we've made this thing. Why are we interested in this? You know, what's the context for it and the thinking behind it? Then Clayton's going to give a bit of a demo to show it, and then really it's and then Mel's going to talk a bit about some of the user testing that we've already done and all the user feedback that we've already had, but then really we're finishing. You know, the whole point of today is really an invitation as well to everyone who's interested to kind of help us test this thing and improve it as we develop it further. So to set the context for what is build.wikihouse.cc and why, in a sense, it's the same context for lots of this. This is not news to any of you, which is that the way that we build today is pretty broken. We need to fundamentally transform the way that we construct in terms of its impact on its carbon emissions. You know, built environment is responsible for huge share of carbon emissions in various different ways. It's the single biggest consumer of raw materials. It's the single producer of waste, huge amounts of waste. Projects consistently go over budget, etc., etc. The list could go on, and we're all really familiar with those. And broadly speaking, we know what the future of construction is going to look like. So again, not going to talk too much about that here. I think there's a kind of growing sense of consensus around what types of construction, how we should be building in the future. And of course, that's the context in which WikiHouse sits, is trying to take those new forms of construction, so zero carbon, manufactured, and to put them into the hands of everybody. So doing it in a way that's open and distributed, and can be used by any business, community, anywhere really. that, of course, most of the work that we've done and that you know, we see there in WikiHouse project is we do that through the hardware, through, if you like, the development of the Skylark building system, the blocks. So this Lego-like building system, where the goal is really to make it as simple as we possibly can, right? So we're trying to make building in this way so simple that we effectively take off the table even the idea that it's difficult to build zero carbon homes. That's our goal, and that's obviously, yeah, the work that you see embedded in the WikiHouse Skylark system by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people over the time, and trying to kind of manifest that. But how are we kind of doing, really, like on that thing of making it simple? If our mission is to make it as simple as possible to make zero carbon homes, it's really clear to see how, yeah, the Skylark system is a big step forward in terms of making it really, really quick to assemble homes, and hopefully also to disassemble them. It's not quite as simple, but it's simple. We make it as simple as possible, so make it possible for small manufacturers and workshops to CNC manufacture the blocks, and the same for storage and delivery. Again, the Skylark blocks are really trying to make that as straightforward as possible. And what about the other end of the thing? Okay, engineering checking, we've made that quite a bit easier thanks to all the documentation on the WikiHouse website, which we've shared around engineering data, engineering guides, etc. So we've made that hopefully as simple as we can make it for now, for structural engineers to check WikiHouse designs. But what about the design bit? Like, in a sense, yeah, like sharing libraries of blocks saves work, right? In a sense, that's making it simple so that you can use conventional tools like SketchUp or Rhino or whatever you use, or Revit to build, kind of take these blocks and then build with them. And in a sense, that does make the design process simpler, right? Because we can, it's taking components that already have thousands of hours of work baked into them and just allowing you to build with them. But there's still a huge amount of knowledge that's in your head here as a designer, and a huge amount that as you're designing using tools like this, you're guessing at. And kind of one of the things that always strikes me is, particularly if you've worked as an architect, you know that you have this really interesting, weird dilemma that comes when somebody comes along and says, you have a customer comes along and says, and their first question they always ask is, okay, how much will it cost? And then the first question that the architect asks back or asks is, okay, how much money do you have? And they're stuck in this loop of expectations. So actually so much that you need to know in order to make design decisions is sort of in this, well, it depends. And, you know, this is something we've been really aware of as well. So you'll see on the WikiHouse website now, we've now created a simple cost estimator, which kind of helps solve that particular question a little bit. But that's, of course, only one of many questions. Another way to make design simpler is also sharing pre-designed patterns or house types. And there's definitely something that we're going to be doing more of next year. But the limitation of this, you know, this has got limitations as well. And one of the limitations is that in general, most projects are not quite one size fits all. So you want to start with a pattern, but actually you might want it slightly larger or not quite the same design, or changing materials, or moving windows around and things like that. So it's kind of still doesn't completely solve the problem. But so yeah, we're like very often once you actually take a pattern and apply it to a project, the building that you will end up with was not just the original standard pattern. It's a modified, adapted and customized version of that original pattern. And so you still have this same problem of, well, how much is this going to cost? What's the impact of that design decision? So at the root of this, if we sort of really go right back to square one and go, well, what's going on here? I think we're really talking about a knowledge problem. And in his book, The Checklist Manifesto, Atul Gawande talks really articulately about this. So, and he talks about it like this, which is basically the volume and complexity of what we know has exceeded our individual ability to deliver its benefits correctly, safely, or reliably. So he's talking about it in the context of medical knowledge, basically saying there is more knowledge in the world about how to save someone's life in a given situation than any doctor or medical team can meaningfully hope to actually be able to deploy and use on any given rainy Tuesday, because these problems are really, really complicated. And exactly the same sort of knowledge issue actually plays out across all of the what we could call the knowledge professions. So not just doctors, but also lawyers and engineers and architects and so on, right? So pretty much anything that you usually would expect to have people with letters after their name for, it kind of is encountering a really, really similar dynamic now. So let's kind of let's kind of strip that right back to kind of first principles and think about what is, when we go through the design and procurement process of a building, what is that journey and how does knowledge work in that process? So simply, let's start with a site, and where you're trying to get to is a site with a completed building on it. Well, what sits between you and that outcome is this sort of fog of unknowledge, this fog of uncertainties. How much is it going to cost? I don't know. How long is it going to take? I don't know. How's it going to perform? I don't know. And buildings are really interesting because they require a whole range of different forms of knowledge at once. So I often say, like, buildings are technically less complicated than a lot of other things like cars, but politically they're arguably more complicated, because in order to build one, you need the knowledge of a whole variety of different domains. So you need to know about fire, you need to know about acoustics, you need to know about structures, you need to know about health, and so on and so forth, right? And space. And like in an ideal world, what you would have is all of that access to knowledge all at once. You couldn't, you wouldn't want to just put just the fire engineer in control of designing the whole buildings, because you'd end up with a building that's really fire safe but not very nice to use. So what you really want is to be able to have access to all of that knowledge up front, and then make your design decisions with this sort of all-seeing eye, and you can be sure that you're not kind of causing a massive problem for yourself somewhere else by changing your design. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in, right? So today, that knowledge basically exists in the heads, in long books and in the heads of experts. So the way that we solve this problem in the design and construction process today is by essentially employing a chain of those experts to effectively fight it out during the design process. So you start with a sketch. And I sometimes describe this as, in a way that will hopefully make more sense in a minute, is in a way it's all kind of a bit backwards. Because you might start traditionally with your kind of wobbly line sketch, but at that point you really don't know, how much it will cost, or whether it will stand up. You're relying on a series of approximated guesses. And then you have to check, okay, is this going to meet all the relevant regulations, etc. And if it's not, back to the drawing board. Okay, we sort that out. We've managed to. Then we hand it over to an engineer and say, will this stand up? And the engineer applies their knowledge and says, actually, no. Okay, back to the drawing board. And then we get that sorted, and then we hand it over to the cost consultant and say, okay, this is going to stand up, but how much is this going to cost me? Oh, we've blown our budget. Back to the drawing board. Let's do some value engineering. And then finally you get to build this thing, and then you turn out a whole bunch of things don't quite work, and you actually have to probably go back to the drawing board a few times at this. So one of the most amazing realizations about this is that today, when we design these projects, one of the reasons why it's so hard to design buildings is because we're going through this fraught process. And actually, we don't just design buildings once, we actually design every building from scratch several times in order to deliver a building. So no wonder the design process is so expensive and so difficult and to navigate. And no wonder, of course, that so many projects end up being producing lots of waste, because you had to kind of cut and measure things on site and going over budget. So for me, one of the most compelling kind of statistics around this is from a great report done by Bryden Woods a few years ago based on UK public sector procurement data, which is that every pound or unit of currency that we use in the construction process in building a building today, only 51p makes it to the actual building itself. Most of that money is going into the cost of overheads and fees and risks. Now, we don't mind profit, but actually what's really interesting is that when you work on a project, you'll often find yourself having to squeeze down the left-hand side of this graph. So value engineer, make the building smaller, rather than saying, well, actually, are there ways that we can squeeze down the right-hand side of this graph? And of course, that's what really, what technology and manufacturing is meant to do. But there's a really pertinent question here, which is, wait a minute, why hasn't technology already solved this problem? We've got loads of amazing, cool parametric technologies out there, etc. Well, I think probably my take on this is that the reason is that even though we've got all these technologies, we haven't fundamentally changed this basic operating system, the basic knowledge system. We've got loads of information technologies, but we haven't changed the basic way that knowledge works through the design process. So what we tend to do is we take these amazing technologies like manufacturing methods, etc., and we bolt them onto this same old design and procurement process. So we make software, but the software is basically used by the same set of professionals in the same order. And this is kind of played out because no matter what technology we're kind of using, we still find ourselves that if you actually follow most construction professionals around, if you follow an architect, for example, around for a day, you'll recognize that most of their work, most of their time is not spent designing buildings. It's spent on the phone, shuffling liability around and basically arguing with people. Like most buildings are actually, in practice, they're still designed in email inboxes. That's the primary software that we use still today to design is actually the email inbox. But there is another amazing radical technology that could transform this, and it's not new. It's just the web, right? And the web's been around a really, really long time. But what's really interesting in the evolution of the web is, you know, first it was doing text and then increasingly able to deal with more media. In recent years, there's more and more ability for the web to do 3D stuff with things like 3JS, and particularly this kind of continuing move towards like VR and stuff like that. So there's a kind of technology opportunity to say, well, maybe the technology that would really, really change this process is the World Wide Web. And what it enables you to do is to put the process back the right way around. So effectively, when we design, instead of this rather strange process where we do a sketch first and then apply knowledge to it to work out whether it's going to work, in a kind of more sensible, ideal world, what we would do is start with a pre-engineered, pre-costed solution. And I always use the analogy of Lego. So as a designer, instead of just doing a sketch on a napkin, you're essentially being given a series of Lego blocks that are pre-engineered and pre-costed, and then says, hey, within this system of blocks, go and design whatever you like. And it immediately essentially means that you're kind of preloading all that knowledge up front, and you can then go ahead and design. And that's what building systems like WikiHouse are really trying to do, right? That's the kind of one of the things. It's not just about making it simple to build. It's also putting the design process back the right way around. And of course, the real kind of win of that is if you can get that process going, then you can begin to capture that feedback, that data from the manufacturing process, from the assembly process, from the use process, and feed that data back into your original estimates, so that when you're designing and you're estimating, you're seeing ever more accurate predictions of what the implications of your design decision is going to be. So what is build.wikihouse.cc? That's basically it. It's our first shot at, it's actually our probably second. We've gone through lots of iterations, second or third, but it's our shot at saying, actually, let's try and do this. Let's try and make a web configurator that is trying to do this for WikiHouse, to try and make the design process simpler and more transparent. I'm going to hand over to Clayton to actually show it to you. I obviously, I feel like before I do that, I should put some pretty key caveats into the mix. So one caveat, obviously, is this is still very, very much a prototype. So even though we've kind of been iterating and iterating this for a long time, it's still, and there's loads of really interesting bits of precedents that we're drawing on here to build this, but like there's still loads of this which is going to be a bit buggy, a bit untested, a bit weird, and that's obviously one of the reasons why we really want to kind of share this with the WikiHouse community, to engage everyone to help us find those bugs and suggest ideas. The other one is you'll also see the content at the moment is really, really limited. So the initial plan is we're going to put on a series of single story structures, and then we can begin to add some two-story patterns and other patterns into it in future. And I think the third one you'll also notice at the moment, the only currency is pounds, which is obviously fine if you're in the UK, but not so helpful if you're not in the UK. So bear with us on all of those things. And with that, Clayton, I'll hand over to you.
All right, welcome everyone. Let me just share my screen. All right, so I'm just going to jump in. As Alistair said, there are definitely some caveats here, but hopefully I can give you a good run through in terms of how it works, the features, and then we can sort of open it for some discussion. The first thing you do is when you open up build.wikihouse.cc, you'll see that you've got the options to add, to choose where you want to build in the world. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to choose a location that most people probably know. And we'll jump in here. I'm sure Charles won't mind if we choose a bit of land. And so what you can start to do is then draw out the boundaries and dimensions of your site. So we'll choose a little parcel over here on the lawn. That's quite nice. You can make it any shape you want, and it'll give you some basic dimensions. From there, as soon as you finish drawing that boundary, it'll come up with a link, which you then can follow onto the next design stage. So this is the design stage of the process. You can see that it brings in the boundary to scale. And then straight away, the first options you've got popping up here are the ability to add some house types and buildings to your site. Now, as Alistair mentioned, the content is quite limited. We're starting with Skylark 200, which gives you some options in terms of doing single story designs. And firstly, let's just add this pre-configured micro house to the site. So now that's on there, we can do some sort of basic things with it. We can move it around, and we can rotate it. And we can have a look at some over here on the left-hand side. We've got some of the camera controls, so we can change between orthographic and perspective views. We can do things like, oh, let's have a sort of section cut through the house, that direction or that direction. And we can then also turn off some of the layers. So this is quite useful in terms of showing how the model's been built up. So we can turn off all the external cladding and features. We can turn off things like the foundations. And so basically then you're left with the sort of WikiHouse chassis itself. I'll put everything back on again for the purposes of the demo. On the right-hand side here, we have the estimated build cost and estimated carbon cost in this little widget. You can switch between them. So you can switch between carbon and internal floor area, switch the chassis cost and the overall build cost, which includes cladding materials, finishes, that kind of thing as well. I'm just going to position my house over here, and then I can show you what you can do with it. So this is the big sort of all the feature commands for editing the house and doing anything with the building itself is is through right-click. So if you right-click on the building, you bring up this menu here, and you can do things like, let's rename the house. So I'm going to change this name. I'm going to call this one Alistair's Tiny House. And you can also at the top here, you can name your project. So let's just call this one Wiki Village. And we can then jump in and edit the building itself. So when you're in edit building mode, you'll see this little button appear, and you'll see that you can't move the house anymore, but you can do other things with it. So we should be able to jump in and edit the internal level. I just have to go back out again. You can do things like, why isn't that working? I was hoping to show you that. You can do things like stretch the building in either direction. You can make it bigger. And so that gives you sort of the overall control. And then you can also then start to, say, change the material. So you've got a range of different cladding options. If you select the cladding, you can switch between sort of these preloaded materials. So let's say I want to go with the sort of charred timber effect. And that will have an effect on the overall cost as well. So changing between different materials will then have a slight effect on the cost. What's going to have a more dramatic effect on the cost is then if you drag the building slightly and increase the floor area, you'll both increase the chassis size and the cost as well, the embodied carbon. So if it lets me go into edit level, which is not doing it in a minute. And you can also change materials for other things. So one of the main ones you might want to do is say, this building is currently on these jack pad footings. You might want to change the foundations to, say, a concrete slab or some timber screw piles. So let's say you go with the screw piles. You can then also turn the ground plane off. You can see your foundations and the structure underneath. And you can, again, make changes that affect the overall cost of the foundations too. If we turn the ground plane back on again, you can see we've got a nice design there. This is a sort of pre-designed house. It's got an internal layout, which I was hoping to show you, if it lets me know. Yeah, from there, let's just take a sort of section through, and I can show you briefly here with a bathroom module in there, and say a bedroom and a sort of living area. Yeah, so that's one house, but we want to build a village here. So let's go to our menu here, and let's create a new house. Let's create our own house. So we've got what is essentially a sort of starter model that you can use to then completely customize it and build up your own design. So this one I'm going to sort of position this way, make it sort of L shape. And this one I'm going to call Clayton's Studio. And if I then edit this building, I get the same controls you saw before. I can make it wider, I can make it smaller, I can make it much longer. It's quite a long building. And I then want to say, maybe I want to have a flat roof instead of a pitched roof. And you'll see they have an effect on the overall build cost and also on the chassis cost too. All of the chassis cost elements are linked into the WikiHouse blocks. So I'll show you how that works in a minute. And I'm going to keep the pitch roof design here, but I actually really want to say, I want to add a roof light. So I'm going to put a roof light in there. And maybe I want to add some, change the cladding. Let's say, let's go with a plaster render. And I probably need to have a door to get into my house. So if I look at the menu here, Windows. Just hide that little bar. There we go. There's my door. And probably need some more windows on this side. Nice wide one. Maybe up right here. With a roof light. Probably want some windows on this side too. That one. Could do something that might be a bathroom window on this side. There we go. And make it a little bit smaller. And again, on the cable ends as well, you've got options for having no openings, various sort of windows, WikiHouse standard window sizes. But I'm going to keep that nice big picture window there and just add a small window on this face here. Okay, so you can also then change the materials of not just the cladding, but other things as well. So let's say these window frames, I actually want to have a sort of dark graphite window, and this window trim around the outside, I'm going to make a nice timber finish. And there we go. So those are my two houses. I'm going to exit that. Say, look, there's my little village all ready to go. The chassis cost here is, if you look at the build cost, it's the overall build cost for both buildings. If I then edit that building, it'll tell me the build cost for that particular house. So you can sort of zoom in and see which building type. So now I'm going to jump into the next stage, which is looking at what we call the analyze page. So this brings in information from, should bring in information in it. Let's refresh. There we go. So I've got Alistair's house here in the brighter yellow and Clayton's studio in the faded yellow. And you can see comparisons in between the overall chassis costs and the total overall floor area compared to both of them, and a price per square meter as well. There's a bit of information of how to calculate that, and then the overall embodied carbon. And the embodied carbon we don't break down at the minute. It's quite sort of high level based on the product EPDs of the materials. They're currently specified in the design, but we will look to break that down more in terms of difference between the biogenic sequestered carbon and sort of fossil emissions in terms of construction. But for now, it's just a high level net total. But you can then also turn off one building and just have a look at, say, Alistair's house, or let's have a look at just Clayton's studio, or let's put both in one. You can also jump back to the design page as well, and jump back to viewing the design, which the internet's being a bit slow, but should reload. And if you then go on to the next stage, so say you finished your design, you're pretty happy with it. You can have a quick overview of it here. See, okay, that's great. I've got these two buildings that I want to build. Total floor areas in square meters. Gives you an overall cost for both the chassis and the rest of the building altogether, and an overall embodied carbon. And from there, you can actually say you can download the 3D models. At the moment, these come. You can also download them here from the build page. You can export them as OBJs or GLB models. Again, we know that's not going to be the entire list of file formats that people want, so we'll be expanding that as we go. But for now, you should be able to import OBJ into most CAD software, things like Blender and SketchUp, and GLB as well is readable from like a lot of sort of web 3D models. We've got also on the left-hand side here in this navigation bar, we've got an order list. So this will compile the total set of all the blocks within the design. So looking at Alistair's tiny house, we can see, okay, there's going to be 4 corner blocks, 1 door block, and then a set of windows and walls, and then total all those up, give you a combined total for the entire structure. This includes both the chassis and the insulation. Everything that comes on our website here under the WikiHouse blocks is connected through to this table. So you can also then say, okay, look, I'm going to download the cutting file as a manufacturer. That might be really useful. You download this entire table as a CSV. You can then also look at some of the other spec information in here. So you can see, okay, through this, I've made some choices here. I've chosen that I want these sort of default materials. I changed the cladding, so I want to see what the cladding is large, so I can see the cost for that per square meter, or at least a rough estimate, what the embodied carbon cost is, and then again we can add all this up. You can just sort of total cost for the project. Like with the analyze page, you can turn one building off and just look at the cost for a single building, or you can add them together. Up to you, really. Again, you can download this list as a CSV spreadsheet, which then means you can take it further into your own software, or to a builder or a manufacturer, and you can start to sort of work. You know what these quantities are. You start to place orders for the types of materials you want. Eventually, we'll be able to make changes in the specification itself, so you can override these with your own spec options and choices, and your own costs, and it will all sort of calculate on the basis of that. So then from the overview, not too much more to say really, is that you can then download the whole project file set as a zip, including all the materials, 3D models, which might be really useful as a starting point for a design project. Or you can get in touch with us. And so you can go, if you're sort of happy with where your design is, you click straight through here and it'll take you to our standard WikiHouse contact form, where you can fill out a little bit about yourself and what you're trying to do. And you can then attach these files to that form and let us know exactly what you want to do. So we can sort of connect you with the right people, architects, engineers, manufacturers, and installers, and help you sort of realize a project. But the main purpose of this is just to be a place to sort of dream a bit, play around with different ideas, play around with different types, see what the sort of standard blocks allow you to do, and then also see if there's limitations to that and you want to do something more bespoke or specialized. But hopefully that gives you a good sort of feel for everything. You can also then delete a building if you're not so happy with that one. Right, so I'm going to stop there and hand over to Mel, I think, and Alistair.
Thank you, Clayton. Yes, give me 2 seconds. Okay, so feedback so far. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this, but just to recap, I know we've got quite a few comments from Instagram. You are watching a preview of the WikiHouse configurator. It's not live yet. It is a prototype, and we are just introducing it to you today for the first time. We'll give you a way to access it, and we would love to hear your feedback. So just tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. Over the last month or so, we've been asking people to test it and tell us what they think about it. And here are some of the things we've learned. So in the first page, you will see that when you enter an address or postcode, it zooms a lot. So you will zoom right in, and then you'll have to zoom out to actually find the site that you want. So this is something that we are definitely going to be looking into. We're going to make sure you don't have to zoom in so much so that you have to then zoom out. Can you go to the next one, please, Alistair? Once you get to design, as Clayton has shown, there are plenty of possibilities using the menu on the right click. But once people arrive, they are not really sure the right click is a thing to start with. So we need to work a little bit more to make it a bit more intuitive so that people know when they arrive to this particular tab that they have got all these options. They don't get lost trying to find them. The next bit of feedback that we received is, can we have more metrics as we design? So at the moment, you can see on the right-hand side, you have got some amounts in pounds and you've got the carbon. So at the moment, if you have the carbon, you can't actually see the floor area. And it would be helpful to have those things show at the same time. Another thing we don't have is the site area, which is something important to people. So we've got a note of that. Next one, please. Once you get to analysis page, one thing that people have told us, even though it's very helpful to have these 3 metrics, some of it needs to be more context. So we will be adding some of that. For example, WikiHouse says that it's 10% more than a traditional build. But what do we mean by traditional build? Is that brick and block? Is that timber frame? What is it that we mean? So we need to expand a little bit on that. And if you go to the next one, Alistair, thank you. So then we get to build, which is the final stage of the process. We are sharing a lot of information at this stage. Some will be very handy for manufacturers. Some might be a bit confusing if you're only just starting your journey with WikiHouse. So we want to clarify a little bit more what kind of information people need at this stage, so they can then go on to actually realizing the project. So we would love some feedback on this section in particular, in terms of what do you want to go, what do you want to do with the information that we give you, and where might you go next? So at the minute, you have a button that will take you to a type form to contact us, but is that the right balance of information? Is that the right path for you? Is there information missing? Do you want more information at this stage? So these are the things that we have found so far through our user testing. And the big ask for you, the big request that we have for you today is please test it, play with it, break it, and then tell us what you think. Tell us as much detail as you want about what things are working, what things aren't working for you. And to do this, we have a type form that I'll start showing on screen just now. So it's super easy to fill any bugs, any ideas, any thoughts that you might have. So you just click at the bottom, go to type form. You don't even have to give us your name or email address. You can if you want to. But yeah, idea, bug, comment, boom, just send them to us. I'm going to hand over to Alistair now. Alistair, you need to unmute yourself.
Dance between the screens. Thank you very much indeed. What I will do is actually I will just leave that in that view. Cool. Yeah. Well, I guess Mal, we're keen to hear if there's what questions people have really. I guess another thing we should probably do is tell people where they can go and try this out. So as some of you might have already gone on here and gone build.wikihouse.cc, and you'll have noticed that there's not a particularly secure password on it. But if you enter the word skylark, I know we're quite original, then you will be able to get access to it and start playing with it. So yeah, and we'll also be, I think, Mel, we're gonna post this into the WikiHouse community as well. So if you're not already a member of the WikiHouse community, do join that. And if you are, yeah, this post will be there. So I'm sure there'll be a whole kind of thread as well. So you can also kind of comment and discuss it there in the WikiHouse community as well, if you don't even want to use the feedback form. That's cool as well.
Yes, the more the merrier. We will be posting this on Instagram, on YouTube, on our community as well. If you haven't joined the community yet, please do so at community.wikihouse.cc. And like Alistair said, you don't have to use the form. You can just like type whatever you want to tell us. We've had manufacturers, architects, different people coming at it from different perspectives test it so far. So yeah, the more people who can and just kind of tell us a little bit more about what you want to do with it, to help us understand how you're experiencing it, that'd be great. And we've got a few questions. I can see that there's quite a few people. I'm going to bring Clayton in as well to the stage. I can see people from Poland, Chile, Sweden, Colombia, Belgium. Everybody has joined this session, which is brilliant. Thank you so much. It's great to see you here. So one of the questions we have from Thomas is about the costs and what are we basing those costs on? Who would like to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. So everything in there is estimates. The WikiHouse chassis data we have a bit more confidence in, at least for the UK manufacturers, because it's based on feedback and costings that we've done on projects and have worked with the manufacturers on. Again, we need to sort of work to keep that as accurate and relevant as possible, including things like the price of raw material and the price of the machining time and all that. So we want to keep that up to date. The general costs for other materials, cladding, finishes, that kind of thing, are fairly generalized. So they're based on a sort of simple square meter rate with a bit of contingency in there. So it's the whole purpose is to give you a sort of a good estimate early on, rather than as you go through the design process, you're going to need to get quotes and exact specifications. But the key thing is having a starting point where you at least know the ballpark of what you're dealing with, you know the sort of quantities, and you know sort of rough idea of the costs, but better than rough, I think. It's more than just a sort of overall square meter. It's actually breaking down the different materials and choices that you're making in your design. So we're going to get feedback on that. We're hopefully going to work directly with product suppliers as well to get some sort of really up-to-date, accurate costings in there. And obviously try and keep it up to date because things do change in terms of material prices. So the one thing I will mention is that in the build page, with the exception of the WikiHouse block manufacturing, everything else doesn't include labor costs. So any installation costs aren't included in there. And that's because at this point, we don't really have good, reliable data. We can sort of, that we'd be confident putting in there. And also it's quite variable. So for now, make a note that that it's just material costs, not installation.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, there's so many people here who obviously are from all kinds of countries across the world. So it's a really interesting question for us, is this thing about the internationalization of this. And so if obviously that's going to be driven by data from projects. So if anyone is building projects or costing up projects that they're working on and can obviously share data, that's going to help. And I think the question for us is going to be, and hopefully with the WikiHouse network growing, that will help that, will be how granular we can make this. So one of the things about this is the first thing you do is enter your location. So in principle, it should at some point be possible for it to be able to pull on the best available data from that country. But I think that may be a little bit down the roadmap, but it's going to be very much driven by where are the teams who have that information, so that we can begin to explore that slowly over time.
Thank you. I have another question from Leon, who's asking if it would be possible to add your local prices later on.
Yeah, I guess that's speaking to that, really, isn't it? And I mean, there's a really interesting open question, which is local prices, but also local patterns potentially. So, and that's, maybe that's going too far, but I definitely think I can see a point where, if people are doing the projects and they have that data from different countries, that could be something that we'd look to do, to see if we could have it pull on a different data set as well as a different currency unit.
It will also be easy enough to make the materials page, the specification page, editable as well, because it can do its own calculations. If you know a particular material that you want to use, say there's a cladding that's available locally, you can put in the price per square meter or price per square foot if we eventually sort of allow material units, and it will work that out, and also work it out in terms of stretching the building and increasing the overall quantities.
What we could do, Clayton, at some point is we could just pull all the fields into a spreadsheet or something and just share that, so that you can see what are the bits of data that build.wikihouse would need to be able to provide more localized costings.
Thank you. Let me go to the next question, which is from Andrew, asking, I assume internal layouts aren't accounted for within the costing?
We only have one internal layout option currently, which is in the micro house, and that is accounted for to some degree in terms of the services in there and the sort of wall area. But as we add more, we're going to have to sort of factor that in. Each of those are they're almost like a fixed module. There will be options to switch between different types and maybe different layouts, but we're trying to sort of pre-cost those as well. As much as possible. But obviously they're really dependent on specification. If you change between, you can change a kitchen price from a few thousand to tens of thousands, and until we've got that level of data in there, we won't have. It won't really be useful for that from that point of view.
And what's kind of hilarious is that actually in the development of this work, we started off with a version that was much more detailed as a parametric tool, and then we discovered that actually it's not that helpful, because people don't necessarily have that granularity of data. So working particularly on a project with the WikiHouse Netherlands team running Bouw Atelier, over there, we sort of really kind of sweated this problem, and that came up with what works now, which is ironically actually, in a sense, technically simpler, where, as Clayton says, the building is divided into a series of modules, and effectively almost anything could be factored into the cost of that module. It's almost like that module is treated as a sort of little product in its own right, and it has a certain quantity of floor area, a certain quantity of this or that or whatever, and it has a cost attached to it. So it's a really interesting thing as we go towards that digitization of knowledge, with like how much detail is enough detail for now, really. What that also means, incidentally, is worth mentioning, is that as we've said, all of the code for this is open source. It's on the Open Systems Lab GitHub repo, but we've deliberately also designed it to be potentially usable for other building systems other than just WikiHouse. So because essentially these same problems are common not just to WikiHouse, but to any design for modular building system. And we definitely sort of have tried to, that system of breaking buildings into modules, we found was quite agnostic to different construction systems.
Yes, we've got another question. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was made in, and is it open source? I think you've already mentioned that it's open source. We've got a report, and we'll add at the bottom of the video. And Andrew's asking, what if I want to embed it on my website?
Oh, good question. Yeah, on what it's made in, you're going to you'll have to check out the GitHub repo for a more detailed answer. But I mean, the key technology is 3JS, right? So the really cool thing is that because of gaming, especially, there's so much good work being done on browser-based 3D stuff in 3JS, and there's so many libraries that we could use to kind of build this. So I think that's probably the main kind of bulk of the answer. But that's quite nice in the sense that you just open up your browser, and as long as WebGL is enabled, it runs, which is great, and it runs pretty smoothly. Yeah, in terms of embedding, this was one we've got. As you can imagine, lots of user stories on our roadmap. And this is definitely one, the idea of like a YouTube video or an iframe. I guess we're really interested in those user stories and use cases. So like when we say, yeah, please use the feedback button, it's not just like, oh, finding bugs and stuff like that. We would love to hear more about use cases. So I would like to use this like this in order to do that. It's just really, really interesting for us to hear. Like obviously our primary priority is like we want to test this for a little while, get loads of feedback. We want to we know from the feedback already that we're going to have to spend some more time really trying to improve the intuitiveness of those interactions around it. But what we'd like to do at some point is get it on wikihouse.cc. But we're really open-eared really if other people have other ideas about other ways they might to use it, or other features that they think would be really useful from a WikiHouse perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So Piyush, hello Piyush. Piyush helped us test this a couple of weeks ago. He is asking, he's just wondering, did we explore overlaying Google Map with, say, the current property boundary data?
Mm-hmm. This is really funny because literally yesterday in one of our other projects, which is around digitizing planning, they did exactly this. So it's of course a lot to do with the availability of data, which varies from country to country. The map tool we're using at the moment is Mapbox, and we could pull all kinds of map stuff. So Tom, who is the kind of, well, I say one of the genius developers who's been building this, has done quite a lot of really interesting experiments with what map layers we could pull in. And as you can see at the moment, in the spirit of having a minimum viable product, at the moment that's really, really stripped back. There's loads, you can imagine some really, really quite interesting features about bringing not just bringing the satellite terrain back in, but actually, potentially even more like open source 3D models to the extent that there is open data for that. In future, all kinds of like cool things with, the scanners on our phones become interesting. That's a long way off, I imagine. I think again goes back to, if you've got, say, actually it would be really helpful to have those property parcel boundaries come in straight as a thing. That's a really useful bit of feedback. So yeah, we could definitely do that if the data is available.
Yeah, thank you. A comment from Instagram. What U value do your components achieve? Do you have standard details?
Yes, so the Skylark 200 series that's in there, it's from memory 0.18 watts per meter squared Kelvin is the standard U value for the wall components and the floor. And the 250 series is 0.15. The standard details, we are working on those to include them within the design guide, WikiHouse design guide. So you can be able to see examples for how we design the sort of cladding details, or the foundation, where the foundation meets the wall, that kind of thing. And hopefully be useful reference. Again, we don't have sort of prescribed rules in terms of how this should be done. We just have some best practices. So we can give suggestions, but in most cases, you're probably going to want to work with a designer, an architect, or someone with a bit of experience to make sure that those are detailed correctly.
And I think the other thing that's worth mentioning, right, that's just the kind of the blocks by default. And obviously that numbers is going to vary between whether it's WikiHouse 200, which is 200 wide, and WikiHouse 250. Of course, the nice thing about WikiHouse is you get this sort of chassis that you can also fit other stuff onto. So there's plenty of details you could do where if you did want additional insulation, you could add, for example, wood fiber insulation onto either the inside or the outside of the chassis, as well as if you wanted to add some additional.
Yes. Another question from Instagram. Is it possible to make, or will it be possible to make a custom house project like an L-shape, for example?
Oh, very good. Yeah. So you've tapped onto exactly some of our big kind of roadmap items, and we've, as you can imagine, as we've been sort of sweating this and playing this for so many years, we had to draw a line and say, right, we leave this behind for now. We keep this one on the roadmap. So we have put in stretching the width of the building, which you can see there. And so flip it, you can do a bit of that, but we have not yet got L-shapes. I think probably before we get to L-shapes, L-shaped buildings, we'll probably be looking at the two stories and more, because obviously that's a pretty significant use case, and it involves things like stairs. Like, we're not totally happy with the interactions around internal layouts yet, and like I think there's going to be space to explore that. But yes, like L-shaped buildings is very much on the radar. We're kind of hoping, and again, we're really mindful here, as you know, as you got from my sort of philosophical ramblings earlier, that we're kind of trying to bridge that gap between a dream, really, about how design could and should be, and then building something right now that's really useful and makes life easier and works right now. So we're really interested to hear from people the kind of workarounds, to the extent to which this is useful even with its limitations now. So for example, you might make a chassis, download the 3D model, and then actually in your normal 3D CAD or BIM software, then make some special components, or then create an L-shaped building, you know, yourself in there. But just still, does this make your life easier? And is there anything we could do to it to actually make those workarounds on the short term more useful to you? So we're really interested. We don't know exactly what the workflow is of this, because not least because around WikiHouse, there's so many different types of people with different levels of skill and knowledge, and etc. So we're really interested to hear what your workflow is and where this fits into it, and if there's anything we could do to it that would help it be more useful sooner.
You can sort of hack an L shape at the moment. If you just want a really quick idea in terms of roughly what the cost might be in terms of chassis, you can put two buildings together.
Which is broadly how you do an L shape in WikiHouse at the moment.
Exactly, yeah. So if that's what you're trying to work out, but in reality, to actually build a chassis, you're going to have to, there could be some sort of special junctions.
One of the hardware kind of innovations that we just haven't done, but we know it's or we feel, I say no, we feel pretty confident that it's not controversial from an engineering point of view, is going to be what we call beam-to-beam connections. So at the moment, when you go on the WikiHouse library and look at all the blocks or get a design kit, you'll get a load of beams which are designed to sit across a single span building. But actually, of course, it's quite possible that in your projects, you might want to have multiple spans. So you have a room, then a wall, then another room, and that might be how you make that L shape. It's not that you could do that yourself now by just taking the blocks, the WikiHouse blocks, and hacking them. But at some point in the future, we will also add some blocks to the library that help with that, and maybe that will then line up with us, see if we can build some of that functionality into build.wikihouse. But let's see how it goes. I mean, this whole thing is a really, really big experiment. Like, if this isn't useful, we might shelve the whole thing, which will hurt us, because we love it and we've poured so much love into this project over so long. But yeah, we want to make sure what we're building is useful and we're prioritizing the stuff.
Okay, I am just going to wrap this up because we've gone over an hour. But one last time, can we please remind people what they need to do to test? Nobody needs to sign up for testing. You simply have to
go to build.wikihouse.cc. The password is skylark, all one word, and have a play and hit the feedback button.
That's it. Please, yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear how you're planning to use this, what you love, what you don't understand, and how you break it. We'll be back with you in January. At the end of January, we've got an event every month. So please do come join us. We'll be putting more details in the community forum at community.wikihouse.cc. If we didn't get to your question, we'll answer it below in the video description. And thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited. We'll put all the details underneath in the next 5 minutes, and please go and test and play with it. Thank you very much. See you later.